Do you want the lights? You want the lights pretty much up?
Pretty much up.
Okay, so just dim it a little then. All right. Many of you here today know Diane Hall well. She is our former president. She is an awardee of the E. John Searles Award for ludicrous devotion to the club. She has been outreach chair. She has been first vice president. And I have known her for longer than most of you. I've known her for about 20 years now, and we've been married for 15 years in August. So,
Awesome. Yay!
What I would like to say is that she has gotten to a lot of great observing sites without me, and she's going to tell you about one of them. So, here is Diane Hall.
Whoa!
Astronomical Society.
All right, does the mic work now? Yep. My mic? Perfect. Okay, so, last March, the University of Chicago announced they would be defunding the Yerkes Observatory, home to the largest refractor telescope in the world. It was founded by the legendary astronomer George Ellery Hale in 1892, and it's the place where astronomers from E.E. Barnard and Edwin Hubble to Chandrasekhar and Carl Sagan conducted their work. So my initial reaction was, that can't happen. They're not going to really do that, right? Somebody's going to step in and prevent the closure from happening. It's Yerkes. It's sacrosanct. It's a chicken, you know? Well, no, actually. So during astronomy at the beach last year, it was September, and a member of the FAC, Ford Amateur Astronomy Club, who had just gotten back from a trip to Yerkes himself, he said, no, they're closing for real on October 1st, and all the observing sessions for the Great Refractor are already booked up. Well, this crushed me. This had been something Jeff and I had talked about. Maybe we could organize a joint trip. Jonathan there had actually gotten to do an observing session at Yerkes 3 years ago, last month. And so it was something that was on my actual bucket list, on my home drive of bucket list activities. And here it was mid-September, and they were closing October 1st. So, you remember those old Citibank commercials? It'd be something like, last-minute tickets to Milwaukee, cost money. Room at the hotel airport, money. Rental car, money. Getting to Yerkes in the nick of time, priceless. With some encouragement from my observing partner, I booked tickets to Milwaukee, and I was out of there. So, I showed up on a jaw-droppingly beautiful September afternoon. The building was stunning beneath blue skies and green branches. Where's the photo?
It tore down.
It's been canceled by the University of Illinois, Chicago.
Nuts! Did it crash?
It was too awesome for your eyes.
Too awesome for your eyes. Okay. So, and that of course excited me because they had an observing session that night, and it's clear, it's blue, it's calm. Okay, things are looking good. Now, did I have a slot in the observing session? No. We were going to deal with that one step at a time. Right now, I was on site, so that was good enough. So, I'm going to say it was a strange experience and a melancholy one because it was so clearly a living workspace as well as a dying one. It felt like a place of its time, outside of time, filled with all these reminders that people lived and worked and went about their normal lives with normal workaday stresses in the shadow of this incredible historic instrument. It was also packed with exhibits, old school, text-heavy, picture-heavy exhibits. So I kind of pulled through there with my camera. The lighting was terrible, my phone camera was terrible, but I was just trying to capture every bit of information I can because I didn't know when anybody would ever get the chance to see it again. Like, here's a vintage invitation. Mr. Charles Yerkes himself, the Chicago robber baron, invites you, gentle person, to, you know, the dedication of his telescope. What's going to become of all this stuff? Go in a box? Fire sale? Auction? Who knows? Now there were manned tours that day, guided tours, and everything around me was crammed with details of, you know, modern observatories don't look like this. This was a temple. This was a cathedral of astronomy. So some, man, I guess my, it crashed.
Well, that's...
Keynote crashed. These pictures are just too good for y'all to see.
No, I think it's because it's
We didn't pay enough.
machine from WWDC.
You want me, I can put my pictures up there if you wanted to.
We're back up.
We forgot to put the quarter in.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Oh.
You gotta go back and show.
Yeah. So here's what greeted my eyes upon getting there. That's the picture that was black earlier. So this skylight represents the sun. And the staff was able to explain this because it's not terribly complicated imagery. A lot of the architectural details they were not able to explain for reasons we're going to get into in a moment. Now understand, 3 times the normal number of guests showed up for the tour that morning. The first tour was so crowded that I was kind of claustrophobic. It was a narrow, long space with a lot of noise because it's marble and glass. I decided I was going to hide in the gift shop while the crowds dispersed. After all, I had nothing better to do that day than to soak up as much of Yerkes as possible. That was the only reason I was there in Lake Geneva. So the gift shop was pretty cleaned out, and I cleaned them out some more, but it was their last day of operation anyway, so I scored stuff like this. I thought this was a super questionable keychain. It says, the space shuttle is a totem of retiring happily after a long and illustrious career. So by 5, give them to 3 friends and 2 enemies.
How do you know which is which?
You don't. They also had things like all this kind of cute merch, like a corkscrew and boxes of tektites. Just, you know, everything was cheap, so I scooped up a lot of it. I was also able to get access to their plate collection, which was for sale. And I got some once-in-a-lifetime finds. In particular, a plate that the illustrious E.E. Barnard took at Lick in California before arriving in Yerkes for his brand new job at the newly opened place.
I hate you.
Did he bring it with him himself? Nobody knew.
I got a couple of those too.
In fact, the guy taking care of the plates at that particular moment was actually a journalist by trade and knew less about the plates than I did. But A, it was amazing. B, going in there and looking through the plates and buying some plates helped establish me as a legitimate astronomer, which was useful for my long-term goal of getting into that observing session.
Were the plates well documented?
Some were, some weren't. Some were documented by some kind of coded system that nobody there on the scene could decipher, particularly the smaller plates. When the crowds were a little less intense, I joined the tour of the dome itself. I love this control panel, and Gary, I'm glad you're here because they have a copy of the Observer's Handbook for 2018 right there in the console. There is nothing like this beast of a telescope. I was doubly lucky in that the dome had just been repaired after being out of commission for a few days because the very high volume of people coming meant that the old creaky equipment was kind of not up to the volume. So volunteer Richard Dreiser, a pretty prominent volunteer there, he talked to the press a lot last year. He demonstrated the 40-inch refractor and explained the significance of the telescope, the dome, its moving floor, which they call the largest elevator in the world. And they were all really, really happy decades later that Albert Einstein had come to visit. They passed around this photograph of Einstein meeting the Yerkes staff like it was, you know, again, a sacred artifact. Okay?
He is.
Let's see if this video plays. Oop, no.
I think you have to click the plate.
There you go. You're on. Goes.
Oh, mama. I lost Monty's louder than that.
It shrieks, it groans, it is like some Leviathan out of another time.
Yeah.
Well, we had a few minutes with the telescope, and then it was back out in the bright sunshine for a different guy, also named Richard, who talked to us about the architecture itself. But the architect, Henry Ives Cobb, he destroyed all his records. So we don't know exactly what all the incredibly detailed reliefs or the carvings, we don't know what it means. We've got guesses. So there's all these faces and the pillars. Like, well, this one is Yerkes, this one is John D. Rockefeller, because he was a big University of Chicago supporter. Okay, fair enough. So here I am chilling with that satanic-looking face over my head. Sure, supposedly Yerkes himself as a green man. This is a more respectable portrait of the robber baron as a rich man. That bust was in the rotunda. And here he is as a Saturn, which tells you a bit about his reputation, which was really bad even by the standards of late 19th century industrialists. This one was funny. So the outsized nose belongs to an alleged caricature of John D. Rockefeller. The man had lost his hair from an illness and wore a distinctive wig that pretty much matches what's on there. But his nose was not that size. Originally, every carving of Rockefeller was accompanied by a wasp or bee at the end of his nose stinging it. They were all removed before he came for a visit and got to see that. The rotund man beneath him is rumored to be University of Chicago President William Rainey Harper, who alternately in the artwork looks pleased at his grand observatory, and in other images shocked at the price tag. Speaking of prices, this just kind of made me sad. It's Yerkes, and they got a little box out with no money in it. Even the outbuildings, they were really cool. No, they just weren't part of the tour. They were just standing out there in the lawn. Nobody explained what they were. I went out, poked around. My official tour had ended, and I had a rental car filled with mementos, and so now was plan B, how to get a spot on the observing session. So, talked to some of the friendlier members of the daytime staff who were impressed with what I knew, and it was, just show up early. Maybe you can talk your way in. Okay. 80% of success, is showing up. I got in. The tour was fully booked, packed with 20 people. I apparently was 21. I had to talk to at least 4 different people to get my spot, but I was there. I paid my money, and I got in. Victory. So what did we get to see? Since it was a packed +1 tour, we could only really look at 6 objects because obviously moving an instrument of that size is very time consuming just by itself. We saw Mars. At that point, Mars was still in opposition-ish. Syrtis Major was dead center. Jonathan had seen it in the previous opposition in 2016. He got to see it through a red filter. They did not use any filters the night I was there. It was a different person manning the telescope. We saw Saturn. We saw the globular cluster M15, and we saw a nebula called the Blue Snowball. And despite the presence of a fairly large moon, everything looked wonderful. It was a 40-inch instrument, what can I say? Then we looked at 2 views of the moon. Most of the people present that night had never looked through a telescope before. They paid this made me sad. They paid $100 for the privilege to look at Mars through the world's largest refractor and say, I can't see anything. I step up to the eyepiece. Mars, Syrtis Major, incredible detail. Hand it over to the next person and I can't see anything. The telescope operator and the unit of C intern were doing their best, but it was really a lesson. You can put the most fabulous instrument in the world in front of people who haven't learned yet how to observe because nobody's taught them, and there's not time to teach them an event like that, they're not going to see it. They were more excited to look at pictures on the iPad because they could actually see pixels on the iPad. But hey, everybody got to look at the chairs. People who met Iceland got to sit on those chairs, very, very special chairs. This is the blue snowball. You can see that level of detail. Again, the moon was about 60%, maybe greater, and you could see layer upon layer of structure in the planetary nebula. I was also pretty pleased with myself because some of the objects were a surprise, and I was able to guess that they were moving into M15 before they landed on M15. So, was it the best observing session of my life? Optically, object-wise, no. But I knew going in that Lake Geneva was in Arizona. That wasn't the point. The point was 40-inch telescope. The dome itself, okay, it was very cool. The moving elevator goes up and down. You felt at a point like you could almost touch the gears. The view outside the windows changed. You could see different parts of the observatory grounds lit up by the moon as you go up and down. It was great. The next day I went and checked out the Lake Geneva Historical Society Museum, and they had some Yerkes artifacts, so they've got more vintage photographs, a model of the refractor, stuff like that. And then they had a little corner that I thought was neat. It was watercolors by a lady named Ella Blakesley, who was the wife of the longtime Yerkes chief photographer. And it was called An Artist's Vision of Lake Geneva. So I'd already seen a bunch of her husband's photographs, and seeing her watercolors just added a nice dimension to the whole visit. They also had trivia on some of Yerkes' most famous visitors, like Grand Duke Naughty Boris of Russia, who came to Yerkes in 1902, had himself a really fun time in Chicago, but apparently did behave himself at Yerkes itself. So that was my visit. What next? Well, Yerkes did shut down about 9 days after I got there on October 1st of 2018. If you go to the website for the University of Chicago now, you can see this. What's next? At the time I went, the staff and the volunteers were all in the dark. They were not very happy about anything. They felt like people just weren't being straight with them, weren't telling them what was going on. Negotiations were taking place at the time between the university and a nonprofit called the Yerkes Future Foundation. Those negotiations hit a snag in November over the need to involve actual Yerkes, the man, descendants in the negotiations, which have continued up through May. So as far as we know, they're still talking. In the meantime, I personally see some red flags with the foundation. They have no web presence beyond a Facebook page. It hasn't been updated since last year. It's been 13 months. And to contact them, you have to go through the LinkedIn social media profile of their vice president. That's weird. Meanwhile, on a happier note, the community has rallied around the outreach programs and the need to keep doing what Yerkes was doing as much as they can. So the Geneva Lake Astrophysics and STEAM, GLAS, not GLAS, has been organized to continue the outreach activities that had been done at Yerkes, even if they don't necessarily have access to the historic site or the giant refractor or the other telescopes there. So if you're interested in checking out them, they do have a functioning website. They are, they have a donate link, so that at least is going on to support the community. So I know we're a little bit over. Just have some acknowledgments. The awesome staff and volunteers at Yerkes made a very fun trip. Jonathan Kade's support and encouragement got me there to start with. Lake Geneva is a lovely town. Had a great day. It's a beach town, and it was basically the end of summer, so. And of course, I've got to thank the fellow astronomer who tipped me off that if you want to see Yerkes, you better go now. And I'd like to thank my Amex card for making it possible. Any questions? Yes?
Out of curiosity, why was Keanu Reeves there?
He likes the area and has spent some time there, so he was there on their board of notable people who come and hang out in Lake Geneva.
Oh yeah, I worked on my house out there.
Yeah.
All right. Who would you, Diane?